Hey guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel, and today we're going to be reacting, you know what, to, whatever, we're just going to be reacting, wait, where are we reacting to again? My 7-year-old sister is on the run for more murder. It's called My 7-Year-Old Sister is on the run for murder. Yeah. Okay, let's just get started with this.
Buckle up, because I'm about to take you for a wild ride. I'm a college
Was that a
student
car
and was currently
flying?
enrolled in the hardest calculus class in the school. My professor sent us home with a math problem that no one had been able to solve before. He said that Einstein himself couldn't solve it, so naturally I wanted to be the one to crack it. I worked all day and night trying to get it done. I started crying in frustration when my adoptive sister ran up and took the paper. I was about to yell at her for scribbling on it when I noticed she had solved it in a matter of seconds. No way. This has to be a mistake. You see, my family adopted my 7-year-old sister from another country a year ago. My parents had completely given up teaching her things. They thought she couldn't learn, but I could sense that she was holding back. For the last few months, I had been teaching her to write in English. Since she is a mute who can't talk, I thought it would be good for us to learn how to communicate with each other that way. Here she was, struggling to write down words like apple and cat, suddenly solving complex math equations. When I asked her how, she just shocked me again. She pushed her finger up to her lips to tell me to keep it a secret. Why would anyone want to hide being so smart? And by the way, do you want to be smarter? Subscribe to the channel to hear all our daily crazy stories, and tomorrow you will wake up smarter. So I didn't want to take credit for doing the math problem, but I did want to know if she was actually right. I brought the paper to my professor and just asked if he could take a look at it. He was so excited. When he asked who solved it, I panicked and said it was me. He was beaming. He kept telling me how proud he was and how smart I was. What's worse is he called my parents to let him know that no one in their 30-year career had ever solved it before. I wanted to tell them about my sister, but they were glowing. How could I just disappoint them? I felt so guilty and confused. I wish I never brought that stupid problem home. Every time they bought me a new gift or praised me, I looked towards her. She was always shaking her head, begging me not to tell. In retrospect, maybe I should have said something, but I stayed quiet for her. One night, I couldn't take it anymore. How did a 7-year-old know math so well but couldn't even spell out the alphabet? I yelled at her, explaining she made me feel horrible. She made me a fraud. I demanded to know where she learned so much math, and I was not about to take her playing dumb. She looked at me with a bit of understanding and started to scribble out a paycheck in front of her. From what I could make out, there were 3 words: woman, secret, run. What's this even supposed to mean? I shouted. You need to explain yourself. She sighed for a moment and flipped the paper over. This time she wrote a lot more than 3 words. In fact, she wrote an entire paragraph. Unfortunately, it was all in a strange language. I stared at it for a moment and just got more frustrated. This didn't solve anything. She then did something more shocking than solving a math problem. My mute sister pulled me close and said something. She whispered in my ear, "No one tell." I agreed not to tell a soul, but she needed to promise never to touch my work again. She sadly nodded her head. I thought this would be the end of it, but unfortunately, the damage was already done. My professor told everyone about the paper. He constantly pointed out how smart I was in class, and when I tried to deny it, he just told me I was being modest. Suddenly, I went from the shy girl no one noticed to that mysterious woman everyone was talking about. At university, everyone started to show an interest in me. They started coming for help on assignments or asked how I did on my work. When I didn't want to tell or said I couldn't help, people simply thought I was being arrogant. No one likes others that don't help. In fact, did you know that some bats will start to ignore other bats that don't share? Well, I accidentally became a lonely bat, all because people thought I was hiding something when I wasn't. What started as an appreciation turned into hatred. I went from the smart girl everyone wanted to be to public enemy number 1. People tripped me in the halls and found different ways to mock me. One time when my teacher was solving a very complicated equation, he asked someone to come to the front. When no one did, people started pointing at me. Let the genius do it. I had no choice but to run to the front of the room and attempt to solve the equation. The problem was, I didn't know it. It was pretty obvious to both the professor and the rest of the students that I had no idea what I was doing. After I wrote the wrong thing on the board, everyone started laughing. The professor looked so disappointed. This one really popular girl who had been jealous of all the attention I received threw her sandwich at me. Soon everyone followed suit and started throwing their food. I ran out before the professor could stop them. I was so sad and embarrassed. I just sat in the hallway and cried. I didn't ask to be the smart girl, I cried to myself. Those girls were jerks. I looked up and saw one of the foreign exchange students. He was incredibly popular and super hot. I was completely frozen. I never thought he would speak to me, let alone defend me. They're just jealous you solved that equation. I couldn't keep the lie up any longer. Actually, I didn't do it, I admitted. He looked pretty surprised. That is not exactly something you can Google. I tried, he said. How did you manage to find it? I dug into my bag and pulled out the note my sister gave me. I figured he spoke a few languages and studied linguistics. Maybe he could help me out here. He stared at it for a moment and shoved the paper back into my hands. Before I could say anything, he covered my mouth. You know, we should meet in private, he said. What does the paper say? I asked. It says nothing, but you should really come to my dorm room tonight, 7 o'clock sharp, he said again. Okay, I stuttered, my face turning bright red. Perfect, it's a date, he said. Then he winked at me and darted in the other direction. It was confusing, but I was not about to question it. I wasn't used to getting asked on dates, and when the smartest and hottest guy in your class asks you to meet him at 7, you meet him at 7. I really thought it was a romantic date, but I didn't feel that way once I got to his dorm room. See, I had spent the last few hours getting all dressed up in my best outfit with all my makeup done. I even wore high heels. The boy, on the other hand, well, he just looked stressed out. It was obvious he had to run back to his dorm and hadn't left his computer since our conversation earlier that day. He barely looked up at me when I walked in the room. You do know why I asked to meet you here, he asked. I just kind of sat there for a second. I didn't know what to say. He seemed very angry all of a sudden. Who wrote the paper? He shouted. Who was it? He demanded I tell him who wrote that paper. I told him my little sister drew it. He flipped his computer around very quickly. My heart stopped when I saw what was on the screen. It was my little sister, but she was wearing a business suit and had her hair done up very maturely. This was much different from her princess footsie pajamas I was used to seeing. He asked if I recognized the woman in the photo. The woman? I questioned. That's my little sister. My parents just adopted her last year. His response? She may be your adoptive sister, but she is not little. He told me to hand the letter back over to him, and he translated. It was in his native tongue, and he just wanted to make sure we were in a more private place before he disclosed what the letter was about. The content of the letter was something I wasn't prepared to hear. It said that my little sister was on the run from the police. She was a big scientist in her home country, and she was framed for a murder. She begged me not to let anyone see the paper, and she would promise never to attract attention to me again. Whoops. Here I laid out a confession to a total stranger. I asked him, how dangerous can she be? She's just a little girl who spends her days playing with ponies and dolls. He pulled up a newspaper article about a 38-year-old woman who looked like a child. He explained she had been wanted in his home country for over 10 years. Longer than I thought she was alive for. I told him that she had to be framed. She was so sweet. But he wasn't so sure about that and asked if he could meet her in person. He told me that she suffered from a disease called Turner syndrome. It's what gave her a strange appearance and let her pass as someone much younger. She was actually an adult, a very smart adult. Even if she did lie about her age, it's not the same as murder, I argued. I could not believe the sweet and charming girl who had tried to cheer me up by solving my math equation was a monster. I agreed to let him meet her, only to prove to him that he was wrong about her. It seems pretty straightforward, right? Well, it was one of the worst decisions of my life. He told me that we needed to keep absolute secrecy. He erased his computer history and had me write down my address on a piece of paper. He told me that if anything happened, I should check under his bed for a red envelope. I thought he was just being dramatic. How often do dates turn deadly? He told me not to answer any strange phone calls I got and to stay on the down low. Piece of cake. Or so I thought. I went straight home that day and we decided to meet the next night. He was to come to my house at around 6 p.m. I told my parents that he was my boyfriend and he wanted to meet the family. I was a little excited, even if it was just pretend. Suddenly, I got a text from him asking for my address. I thought it was kind of weird since I gave it to him earlier, but I texted the details back to him. When I heard the knock at the door, I ran over. Instead of a handsome foreigner in a suit, I got a few men in official uniforms. They walked in and demanded that we hand over my sister. I ran to protect her, but we were too late. They dragged her away. As my parents called the cops, I called the hot foreign student. How dare he sell my sister out like that? When he didn't answer, I jumped right into my car and drove to campus. I was going to give him a piece of my mind. When I got there, his dorm room was open and it looked like someone had broken into it. I searched through his stuff and noticed that there were some things missing. His phone and his laptop. I quickly ran to his bed and searched under it. I felt around until my hand touched a piece of paper. Sure enough, it was a red envelope. I immediately opened it. In it, he told me that someone must have tracked his computer and gotten information. I should make sure not to answer any messages, even those that came from his phone. If I could, I should try to convince my family to move or go on an extended vacation. Most importantly, I should never tell his or my parents anything. It would only put more people in danger. I was sobbing. If I was only smart enough to solve that stupid equation, maybe none of this would have ever happened. I was feeling guiltier than ever, and it only got worse as time went on. Later that night, I received a message from a woman saying she was his mother. She explained she got my social media from her son's page. She told me how she hadn't heard from him the whole day. I didn't tell her anything. It's the least I could do. Still, it really hurt her not to have any answers. They opened up a police investigation, and to our horror, there were videos of men dragging him away at around 3 in the morning. The realization of the situation made my blood run cold. 3 a.m.? That means he probably wasn't the one who texted me earlier in the day asking for my address. I was responsible for both of their disappearances. Until this day, we have no idea what happened, or where my sister went, or where my fake boyfriend is. Please, if you know any information at all about this, I beg that you put it in the comments below. It's been some time now and I can't get any sleep, knowing that I single-handedly ruined 2 lives.
Too bad. Well, that sucks for ya. That's how life goes.
Your Crack Gutter. Our Gorilla Waterproof Patch and Seal Tape for the toughest jobs on planet Earth.
Okay, guys, we're gonna watch one more.
Hello, my name is Haley, and I'm 22 years old. Today, I'm going to tell you a story about a very complicated and confusing time in my life. You see, I've never had a normal family experience. My parents split up before I was born and fought endlessly over my surname. My dad sued me when I was a child, which led to an insane trial that lasted from the time I was a few months old until I was 5. Growing up in that family wasn't easy, and now that I'm in prison, I can see why I've made some choices of mine, especially after my mom told me a secret she had kept from me my whole life about what my dad has done. But before I continue with my story, hurry up and subscribe to this channel, or all your friends will know your most embarrassing secrets. So, she was in the hospital for only a few days while my father was trying to reach her. When she got back home, she found him waiting for her there. Mom called the cops and had my father removed from the house. A few months later, my father sued to have my name changed. The thing was, he didn't sue my mom, he sued me. My mom had to dress me up and take me to all sorts of trials when I was only a few months old. The process was stretched out for so long and was all over the news thanks to my father's lawyers. The trials went on for years, and they were anything but civil. The public was fascinated by our family drama, and by the end of the first year, protests started to form outside of the courthouse, and sometimes outside our home. As you can imagine, this was not a great way to grow up. The trials finally ended when I was 5 years old, when the judge yelled out, "Enough is enough. I will not let this go on any longer." He declared that I could choose my last name, as I was old enough to speak for myself now. It was a nice thought, but now I wish he let an adult help me instead, because I chose the last name Glitter Pony. Going through high school as Haley Glitter Pony wasn't easy. I was always the brunt of the jokes. I had a few friends, but not many, and they didn't stick around. My mom and I moved around a lot, trying to get away from our past. The more we moved, though, the harder it was for my mom to get a job. She started to blame me for it, and we fought all the time. We lived in a new city every year, sometimes 2 a year, and she always threw it in my face. By the time I was in high school, she had to work 2 or 3 jobs to support us. She left well before I was up in the morning and came home extremely late at night, exhausted and cranky. I'd ask her how her day was, and she'd always respond with some level of disdain. Most commonly, "I used to be a nurse before you and your drama came along." I would do my best to sit in silence or leave the room, but once she was in her room with her TV on, I snuck out. It didn't matter where I went. I could just even go sit in a park. I just had to get out and do it on my own terms. One day, I met some people my age in an alley hanging out. They were clearly part of the tough crowd, and I wasn't sure that I could convince them I belonged enough for them to talk to me. I did everything I could think of to convince them I was just like them. I talked tough and even lied and said I had done a bunch of stuff I hadn't, like shoplifting. They saw right through me, laughed at every word that came out of my mouth. But apparently, I was entertaining enough to have earned their attention, even if it was only for the time being. They invited me to a job with them. They said they had to keep it vague so as not to incriminate me. I was pretty sure that taking me along was far worse incrimination than knowing the whole plan, but I wasn't going to ruin this opportunity. We went to a jewelry shop just around the corner, not even a block away. They handed me a rock as they surveyed the area and got a lay of the land. "Here's the plan. You throw that rock in the window of the shop at the end of this street. It's going to set off an alarm. You run down the street and meet us in the alley on the right 3 blocks down," the obvious leader said. "So, what are you going to do?" I asked, not feeling great about this idea. "The less you know, the better. Now go." I had never done something illegal like that before, but it sounded so exciting. I ran to the end of the street and identified the shop they were talking about. I looked around and made sure the coast was clear before doing the job assigned to me. I looked at the rock in my hand and then through the window of the shop. I felt bad about it, but I excused it by saying they probably had insurance and the owners were probably abusive to their employees anyway. No one's innocent, right? "What are you waiting for?" I heard coming from down the street. It was now or never. I threw the rock and a piercing alarm began to sound. I ran faster than I've ever run before. I did my best to count the blocks so I knew I was in the right alley, but my heart was pounding so fast and I was so full of adrenaline that I couldn't think straight. I stopped in the first alley I found, careful to crouch down behind anything I could find and keep to the shadows. A few minutes later, I heard sirens blaring and saw blue and red lights go flashing by. At least they wouldn't find me, I thought. I hid there for about 5 more minutes before I saw the leader of the group run past the alley. I decided that it was better to just stay where I was and lie low until I could get back home undetected. I never saw any of the other members of the group rush by. I thought they must have run the other way, or worse, got caught. When I got home, there were only a few hours left before I would have to get ready for school. I was too amped up on adrenaline to sleep, so I just laid in my bed, vibrating with the excitement of what I had just done. My mom never noticed I was gone, and I saw the start of a beautiful, beautiful thing. I snuck out every night after that, and I got better at it the longer I did it. I had a system. I never went to the same place twice, never talked to the same people, and always tried something completely new, often risky. I tried not to get involved in group activities like the first night. That was a rookie mistake. Some nights, I just wandered the streets to see if I could find anything better than the prison that was my house. Sometimes I'd find new people to chat with, mostly groups of homeless people, and I would often put on a new persona each night. No one could recognize me in the dark, which was something that I liked. One night, someone did recognize me though, and it caused me to break all of my rules. I wasn't expecting to ever come across him again, but once I did, there was no getting out of it. I was trapped. Nothing was ever the same after that night. I was walking down a new street in the more residential part of the city when I got a feeling that someone was following me. I kept my cool, being sure to make nothing at all seem out of the ordinary. I listened carefully and identified the sound of the footsteps moving at the same pace as mine, not too far behind me. I took a deep breath and picked up my pace, trying not to panic. I couldn't possibly imagine who might be following me. I had done all sorts of unspeakable things during my night excursions at this point, but I had always been careful to remain unidentifiable. Who was following me? I kept walking with my eyes glued to my feet and the sidewalk. If I just kept to myself and walked quickly,
I'm sorry,
maybe I could
but
get
I've been
myself out of the
very
situation
quiet.
safely. I couldn't have been more wrong. As I turned the next corner, I felt a hand get a firm grip on my shoulder and pull me backwards. I had been walking so fast that the shock almost caused me to fall over. The grip never loosened, though. I started to scream, but before I could muster a sound audible enough for anyone close by to hear it, a hand covered my mouth tightly. "Keep quiet," a familiar voice said sternly. The person pulled me into a dark alley and pinned me against the wall. There wasn't enough light for me to identify who it was, but I knew that voice. Who was this person? "Look, I'm not gonna hurt you. We need to talk, but in order for us to do that, I need you to not scream. Can you do that?" I nodded my head as best I could, and he freed my mouth. I didn't scream, and he let out a sigh of relief. "You don't know my name, but we met a few weeks ago," he sighed. "I handed you a rock." I was confused for a minute before it hit me. This was the ringleader of the robbery on my first night sneaking out. But how did he find me? "Look, I just need enough money to bail." Confused for a minute before it hit me. This was the ringleader of the robbery on my first night sneaking out. But how did he find me? "Look, I just need enough money to bail my friends out, that's all. Without my crew, there's no chance in hell I'll get enough. I need some help." What is it exactly you want me to do? I still didn't have the slightest clue how I could be of any help to him at all. "I won't ask you to do what I do, that's too much. But if you could just keep being a distraction for me, maybe I can pull enough jobs to get them out of jail." "If you don't join them there first," I said with a little more sass than I had intended. "Hey, I have to try, don't I?" I respected his loyalty to his friends, but I didn't think his plan could ever work. I never expected what would happen next. I followed him down the street to the store he intended to rob. "What do you want me to do? Like..."
Well, I really don't like this. I don't like that. I just don't like that. I'm just gonna cover that. Yep. That's good. Yeah, that's a picture. Yeah, that's good. Now let's unpause this. Oh, let's unpause it. Yep. Yeah, I'm just gonna...
Last time, I needed to break a couple of windows, then run like hell. I only broke one window, and I wasn't too crazy about it. I lied. They've got insurance, and all the owners are all major jerks, if that helps. "You're just saying that. There's no way you know all of these store owners," I said, calling his bluff. "All the rich are jerks," he said, handing me 3 large rocks. I took the rocks and sighed deeply. What choice did I have? I confirmed which stores to hit, so I was sure an alarm would sound. I took a deep breath, steadied myself, and ran the fastest I've ever run in my whole life. I took aim as I ran and made sure to throw each rock with enough force to truly break the windows. I didn't stop running until I was only a few streets from my house. I thought about hiding out and watching to see if he had enough time to get away, but I didn't want to risk it. When I got home, my mom was sitting in the living room waiting on me. She had turned all the lights off and hidden my room so that when I snuck back in the window, I'd think I'd gotten away with it again. As both my feet touched the ground, a light flicked on and my mom appeared. "Just where were you all night?" my mom said, sounding madder than I've ever heard. I'd think I'd gotten away with it again. As both my feet touched the ground, a light flicked on and my mom appeared. "Just where were you all night?" my mom said, sounding madder than I've ever heard her be. I swallowed hard and steeled myself. I could handle this. "Is that any of your business?" I asked, trying to sound more confident than I felt. "Excuse me," my mom yelled. That was definitely the wrong thing to say, but I didn't back down. I couldn't. I said, "Is that any of your business?" I said with an attitude. "You little," she yelled, unable to say the word I knew she wanted to. "What in the world has gotten into you? You were never a walk in the park, but my God, I was never a walk in the park? Try being blamed for something that happened to you when you were a kid." I wish I could storm out, but she stood between me and the door, and it was my room. I had to just stand my ground. "I don't blame you for that. I blame your father. I've told you that. I do blame you for this attitude and your recent behavior, though. That's for damn sure. You've said that, but you've never once acted like it. Get out of my room, Mom. It's far too late to pretend like you care now." I ran to my bedroom and slammed the door, collapsing on the bed in a sobbing heap. Later, I heard my mom talking in the other room. I creeped to my door and cracked it open so I could listen in on her conversation. "I know, Mom, but I just can't tell her. It's not right," I heard her say. It was bad enough that the trial went on long enough for her to remember it. I'm not going to let her know that anything could be worse. My heart started beating faster and faster. What could be worse than that? Look, I'm not going to tell her that her father assaulted me. I'm not. She's already traumatized enough. I did my best to keep this away from her as much as possible and let her have a normal childhood. She already has a bad enough view of her father. She deserves to have at least something to hold on to. I pushed the door closed gently and sunk to the floor. I hugged my knees and started crying harder and harder. How could I have been such a bad daughter? I had to do something for her. I had to get her forgiveness. I made a plan to steal a diamond ring and matching earrings from one of the jewelry stores I had seen the boy rob. I knew how to create a distraction for them, where the things were, and the way in and out without getting caught. I had observed it happening enough. The job went off without any complications at all. I conveniently found the boy I had previously helped hanging out in the same alley where he was the first night I had seen him. He agreed to be my distraction since I had helped him before. He offered to pull off the job for me, but I didn't trust him to give me the items he had stolen. When I got home, I wrapped the beautiful jewelry I'd gotten in a nice gift box. Since I had stolen them, they weren't in one of the jeweler's boxes, so I dug around my room in the hopes of finding some old ones. I was so excited to give them to my mom. I knew they would make her so happy and that she would forgive me instantly. When I got home that night, I gave her the jewelry I had stolen for her, and her reaction was even better than I had hoped. Her eyes teared up immediately, and she gave me the biggest hug she ever had. Oh, honey, how could you ever afford these? This is so unbelievably sweet. You did not have to do this. I found a good deal. Don't worry about it, Mom. You deserve it and more. I'm so sorry. Please forgive me. We hugged and cried, sharing a beautiful moment together. That night, we watched our favorite movie and ordered a delicious dinner. We stayed up until the early hours of the morning, talking and laughing at silly movies. The next afternoon, we were woken up by a pounding on the door. Police, open up. Mom rushed to the door, having no idea what was going on. My heart started to pound. I was certain that the jig was up and I had been caught. There must have been a security camera somewhere, I thought, and now I was busted. When my mom answered the door and the jewelry I had taken for her, the police immediately arrested her. They told me that she had stolen the jewelry and that I would have to go live with my father. I knew I couldn't go live with him. So after the police left, when I was supposed to be waiting on an agent to come take me to my father, I ran away. I ran to the prison to see my mother, to confess and ask her what to do. When I got there, she told me she knew about everything, but she wasn't going to tell the police. She held back tears as she told me to run and lay low. I sighed. I knew what I had to do. I went to the police and confessed everything. They arrested me on the spot and released my mother. She couldn't believe what I had done. Through her tears, she said, "This was too much, Haley. I just wanted a normal life for you. I get to talk to all the weirdos that I want. I don't have to escape at night to explore and act out. Any new adventure I need can be found talking to the people around me."
The moment I woke up, the pain hit me like a ton of bricks. For a moment, I didn't know where I was or who I was.